Welcome to session 15. Now, for today, we've got our first client-side presentation where we're seeing a client of a major asset in Auckland Airport with Karl Fitzpatrick as their BIM manager, sharing with you insights into the role that he plays at managing information and the multiple projects and the vast site that he has at Auckland Airport. I saw a presentation that Karl did in 2018 at Graphisoft's KCC in Las Vegas. Now, I found what he had to talk about was really, really exciting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he has to say 2 years on, or 2 or 3 years on now, from that presentation and what Auckland Airport have been doing over that time. So now I'd like to hand you over to Karl.
Thank you for the introduction, Nathan. This event is a great initiative of yours. It is an honour to share my experiences with fellow Archicad users from around the world. To all the familiar faces out there watching, it is a shame we cannot meet in person. I really look forward to the next post-COVID gathering. For those of you who I haven't met before and don't know my story, I grew up and studied architecture in New Zealand before relocating to Helsinki in Finland, where I have lived for 10 of the past 11 years. For my first 7 years in Finland, I was an architect and BIM manager at AW2 Architects in Helsinki, working predominantly on healthcare projects. However, 4 years ago, I took an opportunity to relocate back to Auckland in New Zealand to take up the role of Building Information Manager for Auckland Airport. However, after a short while in Auckland, my wife and I found out we were having twins, so made the decision to move back to Finland for their first couple of years. Now that they're older, we will be moving back to Auckland in July. So 3/4 of my work at the airport has been done remotely from 17,000 kilometres away. My role at the airport is highly varied, as I am responsible for developing the high-level strategy, developing digital delivery standards, researching technology, developing business cases, implementing software, undertaking model coordination and model authoring. In short, I'm a generalist trying to help a client organisation make the transition from a 2D world of asset information to a 3D and more detailed view of assets to ultimately improve built asset performance. Auckland Airport is located in New Zealand's largest city and is the primary gateway to our beautiful country. In the 50 years since Auckland Airport opened, how New Zealanders travel and where we travel to has changed significantly. At the same time, Auckland Airport has evolved and grown from only several 100,000 passengers in 1966 to 21 million in 2019. Much of that passenger growth happened after 2015, as has the significant increase in the number of international airlines operating at Auckland Airport. COVID-19 has absolutely devastated these numbers and has significantly scaled back our capital development program. The pre-COVID capital works program was the biggest in our company's history, and we were shaping up to spend $2 billion on infrastructure over the next 5 years, with the intention to continue development at a similar pace out to the year 2044. My primary topic for today is about how we can go from BIM to asset information management. While BIM is great for design production, coordination, project management, cost control, and construction planning, as an industry, we are struggling to use the model data beyond construction so that the models can continue their life and add value to the asset owner's organisation well into the future. In use cases such as asset maintenance, facility management, or for further gaining an increased insight into the performance of our built assets. Once a building is constructed, if nothing happens within the building, then it will typically lose value, as it is generating no income. If it is not looked after, the asset will also lose value, as the cost to fix it become too high. Asset information in the digital built environment context is about using the building information to improve built asset performance and increase its value over time, while mitigating risk to the owner. Real estate is some of our most significant assets. Yet in the context of asset management, the physical asset itself is often not given much attention as it deserves. Most asset managers are dealing with financial assets, and a building is simply seen as one number on a spreadsheet. The role of building information models in the field of asset management is growing in interest, and from my experiences, I see this having the potential to unlock significant value and new market opportunities. Architects are fortunate to be in a position to be one of the first parties to get involved in a project and play a key role in enabling full lifecycle asset management. A question I'm constantly trying to answer is, how can asset creators such as architects capture information in a way that enables better full lifecycle management of the asset beyond design and construction? So therefore, today I want to shed some light on what I have learned in my time working on the client side and share what I believe are some fundamental truths that the industry needs to recognise in order for us to truly benefit from the potential of digitising our built environment. So how do we move beyond design and construction into the world of asset and facility management? First of all, we need to address the elephant in the room. All too often I'm in meetings or attending conferences where people are referring to BIM as Revit and vice versa. This is a huge challenge the industry currently faces, as it means project leaders who don't have a lot of first-hand BIM experience are convinced that BIM is Revit, as the two are used interchangeably by their trusted advisors. This can inadvertently shut Archicad firms out of a project from the start, as requirements will be written asking for RVT files as the deliverable. As an Archicad user, it is easy to feel like this elephant, somewhat endangered. As a society, we need to work together to put Archicad's best foot forward and ensure it has the position it deserves within the industry, because it is a great tool and it is fully capable of interacting with other design software. It is important that when we are talking about BIM, we are talking about the concept of building information modeling or management, and not using the other term to refer to a software package. If you find yourself in a situation where it becomes clear another party is talking about BIM but are actually referring to Revit, it is important to play the devil's advocate and point this out. It will save a lot of confusion and shift the conversation about BIM beyond software. If you've been pushed by larger consultants to use the same tool as them, push back and offer a path forward based on a solid understanding of open standards. It will take a lot of banging your head against the brick wall, but it has to be done to avoid the traps of a proprietary BIM world. When talking about asset management, we need to look at the full project lifecycle to understand how information flows from start to finish. If we break the asset lifecycle into three primary stages of design, construction, and asset management, we have three very different processes and ways of operating. The design phases are somewhat unpredictable, in which, as a project progresses, designers understand the requirements and constraints better. This often leads to epiphanies, redesigns, a lot of discarded work, returning to previous concepts, and of course changes to the model. It can often be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. What we tend to see is frustration among architects about how BIM doesn't fit the design process, and particularly in large projects. So in the early stages of a project, we don't always see the early benefits of digital information management. This is where I see Archicad being really useful in these early stages, as you can simply start a project with the zone tool and play with spatial layouts, while still being able to extract useful building information such as room areas throughout the design phase, without needing to actually define any more detail such as walls, as you need to do in other software. The construction management phase is a far more linear process than the design phase. By this stage, the design should be done, and it is now the process of developing the work packages to deliver the built asset and bring designs into reality. Now that BIM is more widespread, it has meant that the engineering disciplines are more actively involved from the early design stages of a project. On large projects, often the engineering consultancy is the lead appointed party, and the architecture team is an appointed party to the engineers. This can often result in the project BIM manager having an engineering background who naturally prefers a more linear approach to BIM. This can impose restraints on the more unstructured nature of the design process and can lead to making for an overly complex BIM process. The unpredictable nature of design is an engineering BIM team's worst nightmare, as it all leads to significant levels of remodelling which hasn't always been budgeted for. Many of you will probably have experienced the resistant MEP or electrical engineer who refuses to change their model anymore. After the complexity of design and the regimented construction process, we then move in to the more cyclical process of asset management, such as maintenance and equipment replacement cycles and space leasing cycles, for example. A large part of the asset remains untouched for many years, but there are still many different people who without AEC backgrounds are responsible for making changes to the building, and currently much of this information sits in silos. Looking at the whole life cycle at a high level, it is easy to see the complexity when trying to keep a golden thread of information throughout the full asset life cycle. No single person is responsible for the full life cycle of an asset, so there is a clear need to be able to understand how each party in the process is operating and using information, so that as an asset creator, you can capture the information in the right format and exchange it in accordance to the client's requirements. A challenge I see in the industry is that the word client is used quite broadly. For example, as a BIM manager or a project manager for a client organization, it is easy to be referred to as the client in a general sense. But in reality, client organizations are much more complex. There are many different roles making up an organization. The majority of people in these different roles are typically not architecture, engineering, or construction professionals, and instead they are dealing with keeping the building rented out, clean, safe, and maintained. While as a client, we have an internal team overseeing the delivery, they are not often the end users of the data that will eventually be received. Many of the end users of the data that accumulates throughout the capital delivery project are left out of the requirements phase, which results in the handover information models lacking in the right information to make them truly useful in the operations phase. Appointed delivery teams are even more disconnected from the end users of the data, as they do not have first-hand experience of what actually goes on inside the client organization. Instructions from the delivery team can be unclear, contributing to the external delivery team not placing much value on the data that could be used post-construction. Moving forward, there needs to be greater inclusion of the end users into the early stages of a project, along with a client who understands the organizational information requirements and can clearly document these to their suppliers. If we are to talk about the business benefits of BIM and digital transformation, we can look to the management consultants McKinsey & Company for some insight. They are regularly dealing with large-scale asset owners and investors and have come to the conclusion that there is significant value through savings generated by the adoption of digital tools within capital projects. This chart indicates the expected savings ranges for implementing digital ways of working. I assume all of you have already adopted the digital tools, but are you leveraging these to their potential with your clients? Based on McKinsey's analysis of the potential savings, these are huge. If multiple systems can work together through their asset lifecycle, they claim that just using the currently available digital tools more effectively could lead to a 45% reduction in capital costs. The things I highlight here in green are elements we already have been using, and the benefits are self-evident but difficult to quantify with a dollar figure. The remaining items within the orange boxes highlight the areas where I see BIM playing a key role in facilitating further savings. When we consider such a shift in the use of technology within the industry, we must look to Martec's law. This law was coined to describe the challenges faced in the marketing technology industry, hence its name, but it equally applies to the adoption of digital technology in the AEC industry. The law states that technology changes exponentially, but organizations change logarithmically. It is not enough to just run after the latest technology and expect your team to use it effectively. When a company starts out, the organization is small and agile, but with the ability to keep up with changing technology. But as the company grows and hires more people, its ability to keep up with technology starts to lag significantly without a concerted effort. Technology changes at an exponential rate, but we also know that human organizations simply don't change that quickly. Changes in behavior and culture take time. There are only so many changes in people, processes, and technology that an organization can productively absorb at once, at least without a major disruption. So approximately speaking, organizations change at a logarithmic rate, much slower than the exponential technological change. The larger and older an organization, the more difficult it will be to change. This is clearly evident in the asset management industries, in which large clients who are not in the business of architecture, engineering, and construction, but invest significantly in built infrastructure to support business functions, are being told that they need to take advantage of the latest technology such as digital twins. This is a huge leap forward for most organizations, and there are so many moving parts that it is not as simple as standing up an off-the-shelf common data environment and asking for BIM. Currently, asset management practices are so ingrained in using spreadsheets and silo databases, therefore the opportunity exists for the modern asset information management company to disrupt the industry by taking a digital-first approach. It is much easier to do from scratch than change an existing organization. The same can be true in architecture firms who have made the leap to BIM and started using Archicad, but have not progressed the use of the software to improve delivery processes beyond 2D drawing production, despite the software evolving significantly. There are many number of firms still using Archicad based on what was possible 10 years ago, not what is possible today. Martec's law would suggest that to not fall behind, a firm would need to have a reset. To move beyond 2D, this will require investment in staff training and development, along with deep conversations with delivery team partners such as engineers, contractors, and clients, to understand the fundamentals of the task at hand, which is not to produce 2D drawings, but to deliver a building that is fit for purpose, on time, within budget, and beautiful. The same applies for building construction. Technology in this industry is progressing fast, but we still provide the same traditional data. As architects, we need to shift the conversation beyond outputting 2D plans. We must engage with the wider supply chain and ask questions of how they are actually making things, to better understand the processes beyond our own, and understand actually how are they using the data. We should not assume that things are always done as they have always been done, even if it may be true. How many clients do you see at BIM industry conferences and events, learning about the latest techniques in building design and production methods? Not many. Yet over and over we hear our industry complaining, but only if our clients ask for it. So this is a bit of a call to arms that as an industry we need to become better at engaging with clients about the advances of the industry, but in a language they understand. Money. Architects are not selling BIM models. You're producing buildings that enhance people's lives and reduce the impact of construction on the environment. They create new opportunities for business to develop or provide high-quality design that increases the value of a client's asset. Or providing assurance that a well-coordinated design proposal, all the way through to construction, will reduce the need for using the contingency budget, for example. Money that would be better spent on design up front. For BIM to have any benefit in your firm, you need to understand your value to your clients and then figure out how technology and improved processes can help you achieve this efficiently and effectively within the capability levels of your people. If the tools don't add any value to your outputs, then you either have the wrong tools, the wrong processes, or the wrong people, or a combination of all three. And at a client level, when we talk common data environment, in the industry we think of it as a place to store project information. But from a large client organization like an airport or a city or just anyone who owns a number of assets, it is much more complicated because within that organization, so within this black circle, you've then got a number of different departments, all with different use cases in this circle here. And they're all requiring data for different reasons. But that data needs to be put somewhere, it needs to be audited, it needs to be enriched, and it needs to be transformed. So many organizations are switching to this concept of an enterprise data hub where data is mapped through a central hub and then pushed out to the various systems that need it. But where common data environments sit within the AEC industry is they've primarily focused on this area of projects. So they're only really scratching the surface of what a common data environment needs to be for an asset owner, and just delivering information to the client in a common format, so then the client can take that on board and use it how they see fit. And a key part of any environment is ensuring that the data is common and follows a standard. So it is important for designers, engineers and contractors to understand that the client's role in the process is quite different to theirs. The client does not typically have an office full of tech-savvy architects and engineers, and they don't necessarily care about the same problems. Therefore, the tools that a client chooses should be based on their own needs and not necessarily to satisfy their suppliers. And this is why the industry needs to adopt an open approach to BIM and not be defined by proprietary file formats. An open BIM approach provides us freedom of choice to use the best tool for the job and to scale at a rate that aligns with the organization's capability to change and our longer term strategy. A one solution fits all approach forces unnecessary change on processes that could have simply been integrated through open data exchange rather than all using the same brand for the sake of easing procurement. An open BIM world lets more people in, and you'll find people who have already have experience using various software but have been shut out in a closed BIM environment. By changing or removing one cog, we do not interrupt the whole system. This provides complete freedom to move with the times and be confident that we can try something new without fear of losing data. But the key here is that while data may be open, for it to work, it must be structured. For quality checking, and we provide a project document management system for our delivery teams to deliver information to us at set milestones throughout a project, and then that enables our delivery teams to then use whatever tool they choose within their external data environments. So they could use BIM Cloud, or they could use BIM 360, for example. So that's enough about what we've learned and our current thinking and strategy. So how are we actually using Archicad within Auckland Airport? So the first example is our Capital Works Master Plan. So as I said, before COVID, we were investing in a multi-year master plan that went all the way out to 2044. And as part of that, we produced this 4D model which captured all of our project thinking going forward. And on a monthly basis, we would update this with project managers to keep everyone on top of what was going on. So the process for this actually was that our project managers, planners and designers would work with stakeholders to understand what projects were needed and what the business requirements were, similar to like what was happening in the top of the V diagram, so the project outcomes and even the asset management strategy where we were wanting to develop our assets. And they would take sketches, preliminary concepts, even like napkin sketches and PowerPoint presentations, and provide those to our BIM team, who would then consolidate all this information onto a plan of the site and just a basic massing model within Archicad. We'd then push that out as IFC to Synchro, and we would then link that with the schedulers information from Primavera. And then we would share that Synchro model out back to the stakeholders within the Synchro viewer, and they could then view that and then make comments for the next month's iteration. And we'd also extract that information to GIS. So I'll show you that in practice and how it worked and looked. So within Archicad, here we have a model of just a basic model. Everything's at zero height, and we have masses of all the projects that we knew and had planned out to 2044. And what we did was within each project we utilized Archicad properties to create a Capital Works set of properties, and we'd fill out the information here and use this to keep track of information and link it to the schedule. And what that then enables us to do is visualize data based on project type, or we could look at which project manager is responsible for which project, and quite quickly you can see just because of the colors who's doing what. And we could also look at what business unit was responsible for what project. project stage projects we're at. And then we would export this out using IFC. We had our own IFC properties to export, so we created a AIAL, Auckland International Airport Limited property set, and then we would map those properties that I showed before to an IFC property, custom property. We would then export the model out on a monthly basis and would bring it in to Synchro, and within Synchro we would then also import an XML copy of our program from Primavera P6, and then we would then link the two elements together. So this was a very effective way of taking what was traditionally a large data set and hard to understand. We had so many different projects and no one really knew the spatial context, and we could quickly bring these in, give them the visual context, and then link them to the timeline, so anyone could then go through and see where things were going to be at in the future. And when I referred to McKinsey before and this 10 to 20% saving, this is what I mean, is that at a large or at a high level we can see, okay, this project here, we might be able to build it now, but if something's coming in 10 or so years time, it might impact that project, so it makes it less feasible. Or for one example, we wanted to build a building here, but then it became clear that we were going to have the airfield expanding into that project, and it meant that the numbers just didn't stack up because the building would need to be demolished only after a decade, so financially it wasn't viable. And just in that decision, that can be $20-30 million that's not spent. And on top of that, we can then use that same IFC to then bring it into GIS, and we've just used the IFC model and extracted it to 2D polygons, and we've used it to build a project governance register. So now I can, this here, it's no longer updated because of the project was stopped because of COVID, but before that we were starting to develop this tool so that we could then click on a project, and the person could see, okay, this project was coming up for discussion in the next 30 days. Where is it and what is it? And then there would be the project information there. So a lot of this information was coming from Archicad to IFC, been pushed through FME, and then published to this ArcGIS online tool. So for sharing information, it could be all online and easily shared with project stakeholders. So as you can see, quite quickly you can share the information. And also the same data where we've got project manager and whatnot in the model, we could then see projects within a GIS 3D viewer. We could see that same information, and again, it's much easier to share the data through a tool like ArcGIS Online than it is to have to install Celebrity or Synchro on someone's computer. Another use of Archicad was quite an unconventional one, which was for our baggage handling system. So the manufacturers had supplied a model within AutoCAD, and it wasn't geolocated. So what we did was we exported it out as IFC, and also in AutoCAD it was a sluggish performance and you couldn't really filter the data in the way that we wanted to. So we pulled it out as IFC and then imported that into Archicad, and then used Archicad to then geolocate the model based on 2D reference drawings, and then we went through and then classified all the elements by type, and then we re-exported that to IFC so that then our baggage handling systems manager could then view that within IFC, and he could also share the model with other stakeholders who are designing future expansion plans to the baggage handling system, and they could click on elements and see the information and split it up by type. So just quickly, here's, I don't know if there are many other baggage handling systems in the world within Archicad, but here's one here, and what we have is the element. We have some basic properties which we're then mapping to IFC and exporting out, and then we can then bring that we're mapping them out, and then we can bring it into Celebri, and then here you can see that same information. So then we can start to filter the model based on, conveyor line, or by the type of element, if it's a pusher or a chute or a powered conveyor. So Archicad was very useful in being able to take data that, even though it was produced in AutoCAD, we struggled to open it in Revit. It wouldn't open properly, but no problems opening in Archicad, adding properties. We even combined a new design that was done to the system. We added that in Archicad and then re-exported it out as IFC. So it's been useful in actually making use of a model that would have just sat on a shelf. And then the last case I want to show is our domestic terminal. So this here we've had, here we go, we have a model that was originally in IFC, and it wasn't modeled to any sort of our own standards, so we've brought that in to Archicad, and then over time been improving the structure of the model, adding information, removing information that's no longer relevant, making changes, and trying to get the model clean and usable. And also we had a consultant who did an extension project. They used architects used Archicad. We've then brought that in and integrated it into our asset information model. And now we can get good clean floor plans that we can then publish out as DWGs and import them into our GIS platform, and use the BIM model as the basis for the floor plans that we're showing in our GIS platform. And what we've also done is then exported that out as IFC, and then now we have a way of sharing the model easily around the business. We could also use BIMX, but Celebri allows us to then quickly cut sections and take measurements, but also visualize the space information. So at the airport, we're interested in things such as what's airside and landside. We have to report on what spaces are used for, so that we don't charge airlines for spaces that they don't actually use. So we're regulated in that sense, so we can keep track of what we call the disclosure areas. We can look at how space is used, like where's the baggage handling, where boarding gates, where's the back of front of house circulation, and all this data can also be exported out from IFC and brought into GIS, which I'll show shortly. Here we have fire evacuation zones and fire routes, and here we have the evacuation zone. So it provides people with a better understanding of our building. And from a leasing perspective, we aren't using this at the moment, but if you think about the data, what we could do is work with, if we have a potential tenant who wants space, or we have an existing tenant who wants to find a new space, we could search for spaces based on size, so we're not wasting time offering them spaces that don't fit their needs. And I can now search, I can find Sunglass Hut here, and we have the spaces modeled, named, and we can then use this information for navigation. So with it being an IFC, we could push this through to GIS, we could push it through to Revit, Archicad, other different tools, and we could even use this information to build like an interactive navigation map within the terminal, so that when our BIM model is updated, our terminal maps would be updated. And that's something that we would look to work on in the future. And just to show you within GIS, here's the model from Archicad as an IFC, and then we've brought that in to the Esri platform and published it through ArcGIS Online. And then here we have our domestic terminal model that we can now share across the business through our Esri platform, and we can build custom applications based on this. And we can see this model was modeled in the correct coordinate systems. It's brought into GIS, and then it overlays perfectly with the standard Esri base map. So we could quickly switch from aerials to these nighttime maps or standard 2D maps. So there's a quick overview of what's possible between Archicad and GIS and utilizing IFC and using it from a client perspective. So our use isn't so much, we're not designing ourselves, so it's more about viewing the data that we've captured over the years. So that was a quick overview around how we use Archicad. Now I just want to summarize some key points about what we need to think when producing BIM models for asset management. And the one thing that I see as absolutely fundamental to asset management is spaces. And this is where Archicad, as I mentioned earlier, comes into play, is that Archicad, you can start modeling the spaces from the very start of a project. So it is much better positioned to actually start capturing that information, and then it would flow through the entire process. So a client will know that they need a particular space and it needs to be an approximate size, and then over time that has requirements such as how many people will use it, what hours of the day it will be used, what equipment it needs to fit, what sort of temperature it needs to be at. And all that information is tied back to spaces. And just as I also showed, the uses of the space can be tied back. So who's leasing the space, who cleans the space, who is the person responsible for maintaining the systems within that space. And that gives you a much clearer view of your asset. And you don't necessarily even need all of the more detailed elements that you see typically within a BIM model. So just from spaces alone, we could be producing really low cost asset information models purely from the perspective of space. And on the same or similar topic is that the larger the built asset, the less it makes sense to manage the data through the models themselves. So when you have so many different stakeholders involved, we start to rely on one or two people to input the information to the model, and then this becomes a bottleneck because the actual owner of the information or the data, they're just simply having to tell someone, okay, I need to have this is a list of all the people that rent spaces, okay, they then need to plug that into the model, whereas that owner of the information could immediately plug it into a database, and then that would feed directly into the model. So at a certain point, it becomes much more feasible to actually have a separate database, such as the Rofus, where the information is managed in the database and it's simply attached to the model. So the large number of the properties are managed in that database. And you see it with our Capital Works master plan, is that I was the person making the model, but I soon become a bottleneck because there's only so many hours in a day, and the people who are owning the data and owning a project, they could have said that, okay, this is the project manager for this project, this is the current status of the design, this is the expected completion date or the start date, and all that information could be managed by them. But the current process of a file-based information sharing was that they would have to tell me that information, often in a spreadsheet, and then we'd have to plug it in to the model. The bigger the project, the more it makes sense to have a database, and that's the beauty of how GIS works also. And a key one here is, like, we've been talking a lot about technology, but technology will not solve all of your problems. It's a simple fact. You have to have the right people, and you have to have them in your organization, and you need to give them the training that they need. You need to give them the space that they need to operate and to do their job properly, and trust that they know what they're doing. It is not enough to just buy a piece of technology or buy Archicad and just expect it to run itself. And I think most of you know that, but it's not. You need to continually improve the process, and that leads to my next point, is that we need to build organizational capability in BIM. It is not enough to have a BIM manager as an additional party next to the lead architect and the structural engineer and the mechanical engineer, etc. It needs to be deeply embedded across the project, and these different disciplines should be themselves learning how to use the tools, how to view models, how to do design review based on models, how to make comments through an issue management platform, how to update an information database so that they can contribute to the whole process of a model, and not simply rely on a separate team of BIM experts who are just double handling information. Those BIM experts if they need to, if they're architects, they need to be brought into the design process and not pushed to the side just because they're some technical expert. So I can't stress this point enough that we need to build capability across the organisation. Too many times I see people leaving organisations and they take away the one BIM person and there's no one left to pick up the gaps, so then things just drop back to the 2D world. The whole organisation needs to have the capability, and everyone needs to understand what is the point of capturing this information in the model and how it contributes to a wider process that's much bigger than just your individual role as an architect. So I want to finish on that note and say thank you for your attention today. I hope that you've been able to take away something that will kick off thoughts of your own, and please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Back over to you, Nathan, for any questions.
Thanks very much for that, Karl. It's really good to see the challenges that you can face from the client side in terms of receiving all of this information from the various consultants. And we're not talking about a small area here. We're talking about large areas, trying to deal with integration of major projects, all tying into one another, different security lines, all of these different complexities. I don't envy your role in the least, but at the same time, it'll probably keep you on your toes.
Yeah, definitely. I think at one point I counted we had about 17 or so projects delivering IFCs on a regular basis to AConnects. So it was like, handling that many projects, all different stakeholders, and I had a list of about 30 different consultancies that were working with us that I was regularly communicating with. So it's definitely keeps me on my toes.
So the question I've got for you then, really around keeping on your toes, is it your new children or is it your job? What's going to grow your hair quicker?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I've got digital twins and real twins that drive you pretty insane, I think.
Twins will haunt you for the rest of your life. My wife is an identical twin, so.
And I'm a twin myself, so it's
I didn't know
triple whammy.
I didn't know twins could create twins, so congratulations on that. But moving on from the excitement of life, and we're not talking about biology today. Graham, I'm hoping, I don't know if that's you, Graham Stewart, sitting there at the other end behind Graham. Be nice to see you there, mate, and coming from Scotland. One key question from Graham, Karl, is around how does Archicad model coordinate and real-world coordinates work with GIS? I know Archicad doesn't like model placing being far from zero, basically, and he's really excited to see the use of Archicad Celebri.
Yeah, thank you. What we've been doing is using... Our GIS system uses what's called the NZTM, which is New Zealand Transverse Mercator, which is a national survey system. So fortunately, the centre point of that system almost runs through the airport, and it starts in Auckland. So it means the distortion isn't too much. Like, you're not going to have a great scale factor as if you would if you're on the western side or the eastern side of the North Island. And that's meant that we've simply used that system and require that within our asset information delivery manual, that all projects are done and coordinated within that coordinate system. And so far, we haven't had any major issues. I think the biggest is when going from taking IFC and bringing it into Revit. If it's far from origin, they might have problems having it appear, but seem to work around that using like Navisworks or something. But yeah, Archicad handles it fine. That domestic terminal I showed you was located like 17 kilometres from origin, so it's working. So maybe the answer to all of this is to locate our whole system's only 17 kilometres maximum from the origin. Yeah, I would. Originally, I wanted to have a point that was sort of at the bottom of the airport that everything would be within, but we had so much data in GIS that was in this national coordinate system. It just made it so much easier to get all of our models into that system. So we've shifted all of our Revit models to that system, and then any Archicad models, and then trying to get Tekla and ProSteel models to the same system, and trying to set it up from the start of a project. And it's been working, so we can just drop in any IFC into Celebri or Navisworks or whatever tool people want to use, and they'll go right to the right spot. So that's enabled like us to start to look at projects in relation to each other and also tie in these new projects to the main terminal.
Isn't that amazing that something that seems logical and simple is so complex and people stuff it up so easily? And we're having this conversation, but then you're saying, you know, how wonderful is it that we can actually just put our projects in the same spot? It's Graham Mayer, so thanks Graham for letting us know that. Graham Stewart is based in Scotland and is a Revit user that I did see that had signed up, so I wondered whether it was him or not that asked that question, so thanks for that. Rosie, I instant families, mate, well done. Rosie's got twins as well, Karl, so maybe I should have set a prerequisite for presenters to have twins, otherwise they couldn't present. Martec, hello, I have a question. Did I jump a question because I got distracted? Yes, I did. Rosie actually asked a question rather than talking about having twins. What is your opinion on the overuse of people adding the words BIM or digital to their current role? And how does this contrast with your point about BIM capabilities across an organisation?
Yeah, I think it's because it's so tied to the technology, and it's obviously all the marketing campaigns are around BIM, so it's just kind of it's an easy thing to say, and so many people don't like the phrase, but they just tend to use it, and myself included. And but it's kind of switching to this digital delivery or digital engineering, VDC, virtual design and construction, and it's I don't know. I think we shouldn't be defined by our roles; we should be defined by our capabilities. So, in terms of getting, my big belief is that we need, what I've pointed out in my last few slides, was that we don't need to bolt on BIM management. You do in the early stages of getting it set up with an organisation. You need to have that focus around the strategic level, but it's actually getting the project managers and the design managers to use it, because otherwise what happens is the BIM managers, or the people referring to BIM in their job title, are kind of working in a silo themselves, and they're seeing problems within the project, but it's not reaching the project managers or design managers, and there's that kind of frustration that, we know the problems in the project, but the leadership team don't, and it's this complete breakdown in the process. And it's really hard to get these project managers and design managers to use the tools, because a lot of them, they might have been former architects, but they're not really on the tools. They've been on the tools for 10 or so years, so their mindset is in the CAD world. So it's a real challenge to get that leap forward. And I think the sooner that we can get all those different disciplines actually interacting with the model, making comments on the model, I don't think we'll need to have BIM in the front of our job titles. We can go back to being architects and project managers and design managers.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. I was very excited when I became a director at Fulton Trotter, so I could just say, no, you can no longer tell me I have BIM in my title. It pigeonholes you in many ways, because you actually have so many other skills that you bring to the table, and you're 100% right. You don't want to be pigeonholed into that position. You want to be seen as what you're skilled and what you're trained to be. Here in Australia, they get excited about digital engineering, and they want to change BIM execution plans, which is what's nominated in ISO 19650, to DEEPs, digital engineering execution plans. You're no, you're saying follow the standard, but you're changing your terminology already.
And I think just on that note, I've studied architecture, worked in the architecture practice, and it's when I went to the airport, people just see me as the tech guy and the BIM guy, and and then it's you studied architecture, you worked as an architect, and it's there's this complete disconnect between. So it's trying to get to the position where it's I'm not the BIM person anymore. It's just, you're just trying to make projects work better.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's almost where we need to come up with a new terminology for it. That's why I get really pissed off when people talk about digital twins, and I don't even want to start that conversation. That's a debate.
No,
we could actually have a grand debate in one of these sessions. It'd be great about what digital twins really mean. But Majaz has asked a question. I hope I pronounced your name right. I'm not good at pronouncing names. I'm gonna admit that. Have you found a choke point in your experience where you've tried to set up databases that work through the variety of fields from Archicad to Celebri and ArcGIS? Probably. Have you hit the capacity yet?
If I understand the question right, I think the challenge is making, if your data is not structured across all your projects, then you're going to have a lot of choke points, because you're going to have to map everything for every project. So it's for us, we're really we haven't nailed it fully yet, but trying to get all projects to follow the same standards, so we can make one, say, script within this tool we call FME, which would take the IFC data through to GIS, and it would be, you could basically drop any IFC in there, and because it's the same structure, it would just, you could run the same script and it would push out the same output to GIS.
Yep.
And that's the key, because at the moment, so many projects they name one calls ground floor, another one calls it 00, someone calls it GF, and it's like just simple stuff like that means you've then got to map that 3 times to get the output.
Yeah.
It's really comes down to the data structure and the quality.
And have you been specifying that on all your projects so that you are getting that consistency?
Yeah, so we developed 3 years ago this asset information delivery manual, and that goes out with all the contracts. So it's basically specifying what we expect in a project and what data we require. And I've just been doing a major update at the moment to it and trying to iron it out even more. But it's given a lot of good direction to projects, and that's what instantly we started getting projects in that they come to the right spot. They're starting to structure the floors according to our naming conventions. It's starting to include spaces in the models, because in the past they didn't, and things like that. Just modeling, like putting in load bearing status and internal, external, like IFC properties, so that then we can take that data and we can then strip it out based on those attributes for other uses.
Yep.
So it's definitely helping. So, but it's a long road.
Oh, it is. And when you're talking about assets that are in constant change, it's very hard to have a finite or an infinite. Well, it's going to come to infinite. Basically, a set of rules that are fixed. It's never going to be fixed. Francois, mate, you're going strong there still in South Africa. I'm very proud of you at this point in time with your activity. You've presented yourself as the most intensive to me so far. So well done. You've been awake since very early in South Africa and followed us all the way through. Sam asked you the question, how has working remotely added to the complexity? And COVID might have been on your side with that, but in terms of before COVID, how did you find working remotely?
It's actually it was surprisingly easy, and I think it's given, because of the time difference between Finland and New Zealand, it kind of, while I wasn't on the ground and actively in a lot of meetings, because simply wasn't awake during the business hours, it gave me a lot of time over the last 3 years to really focus on the back end of things. So it's getting those business cases together to implement tools and pointing out issues in the process, developing standards, and really investigating different software and working on models just to get the data kind of in the background a bit. And it's been really good. Of course, now now feels like the right time to go back, because projects are hopefully kicking off again soon. So it'd be good to get back on the ground. But COVID was kind of forced all my colleagues to realize that it wasn't so bad that I was remote, because in the past it was oh, it'd be good to have you here. But it kind of COVID just dropped all that complaints away, and everyone else was forced to work remote as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was positive in New Zealand, because they only had a couple of hard lockdowns, so they probably wouldn't have realised how bad, locking down for long periods of time were, like Melbourne here in Australia, where they locked down the whole of Melbourne Central for 100 days or something like that. But
yeah, and the other advantage has just been, by being located in Europe, it's just sort of brought me closer to a bigger community. So whereas in New Zealand, just because of the time zone, you miss out on so many online conferences even, and attending events, meeting people who are doing different things, because you're on an island, people are doing things a certain way, and it's really hard to get new ideas. So the airports, I think, really enjoyed having this outside perspective from the inside sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Or you could meet in Las Vegas, in a bar at the last night of a conference and have people come and harass you. That was quite entertaining.
Yeah, exactly.
There's Miha has asked a question. Thanks for a very interesting presentation. What part of all that project involvement complexity would you consider as the most difficult? Now, he's paraphrased this with, I know the first answer would be people, but I'm more interested in the technical part. So what have you found to be the most challenging part?
IT department. It's a challenge, because when you're working in an architecture firm or an engineering company, it's quite easy to just go and get a piece of software and hook it up and go. Whereas when you're in a big organization, whereas like you're the only person who uses these tools like every day, and everyone else is like they're going to be new to the tool, you've got to make it tie into the enterprise system. And what that means is like you can't just go get a software and then install it on people's computer, because no one has access to install anything on their computer. So then you've got to get a completely separate technology department to install it, but you need to make a business case for why you need that software in the first place, and then you've got to have all the processes in place so that someone who knows nothing about the software can figure it out and know how to install it, know how to get people set up, and if a help desk request is put through, they know how to answer it. So it's like it just becomes this insanely complex environment to get software, because you're trying to make it foolproof in a way, and there isn't the chance to really you can't really do it agile and just try things out and fail, because it's people like if I share the data that I have now widely, people will find that it's not all accurate, and this is the thing, we're trying to improve the quality now.
Yeah.
But if there's one part of the building that's not accurate and they can't trust it, then they're not going to use it for a while, and it's going to take time to get their trust back. So really you need to be ready to hit go on day one and have all the change management strategies in place. You've got a solid business case, you've picked the right tool, you've got the right support, you've got the right SLA with the supplier, you've got training sorted. All those things need to be taken care of, which in an architecture firm you might just kind of do it on the fly.
Yeah. We're running short on time because I want to try and have a bit of a break, but I wonder if we can answer these ones quickly. Krez has asked whether or not you have any tools or processes you recommend to keep models updated.
I'm a big fan of like separating it out and using a tool like Derofis or BIMI or something, where you would have the data management of database, because just on a big project it's like you can't get everyone feeding model information into like a Revit model or an Archicad model or Tekla model. You need to have that environment to let other people put data in at the source rather than double handling.
And are those databases connected up to a CAFM tool for your O&M?
At the moment, no, but they will be. That's the plan in the future, that we would feed the data to our data lake, and then everything just, all the other systems pull into the data lake, but the data going into the data lake is according to a business-wide data schema. So that's the intention.
Data lake sounds so nice. I've never heard of a data lake before.
Yeah.
I wondered whether I was hearing things that have been online for too long. But Karl, thank you very much for contributing, mate, and being part of this event today. Thank you very much for participating and sharing your insights in the work you've been doing with Auckland Airport. And I look forward to catching up once again once international borders come down.
Hopefully. Cheers, mate. It's been an awesome event so far. Keep awake.
Keep awake indeed. 9 hours to go.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll see you in a couple of minutes, guys.